I've already got this set up because I was filming a introduction for Alpha Productions, and I thought I looked good in the video, so I'm gonna keep it go. I wish I said that correctly because that would have been a really cool introduction. Anyways, it is September 12th of 2025, and we're gonna talk about our emotions today. We're gonna talk about grief. So I just filmed my Alpha Productions introduction, so I think I'm gonna edit it and throw that on my website, as well as it was like 10 to 12 minutes, so I'm gonna clip it and then put stuff, post it on Reels, just so I have like a constant thing to keep putting out, and I don't care if I like keep posting my face or whatever, because I think that you need to build almost like a personal brand so people come comfortable with you to hire you, because if they like you, then they're more likely to hire you. And if you show yourself, that's my understanding of it all. But that's the sidetrack. I want to talk about grief today. I think grief is a very interesting concept, and obviously I'm still grieving, but I want to talk about it. And I think whatever the word is that I'm like starting to come to fruition with, I believe is the right word, is grieving what didn't exist is almost like 10 times harder than grieving what did exist. So when you and your partner have a lot of troubles with each other, and for whatever reason that is, and the relationship is difficult, especially when there's a lot of love there, I don't want to say it's easy to grieve the relationship, but it's easy to grieve it because you recognize that it wasn't great. And when you're out of it, you feel, not necessarily alive again because you're still grieving the whole situation, but, that sense of relief or that stress kind of like gets lifted from your shoulders. But what ends up happening in place of that is you begin to grieve the future that never happened, and the future that never existed with the other person. And that has been what's really been bothering me, because it hasn't necessarily been like the relationship itself that has really been hard. I mean, obviously, because you're still losing the person, but it's more like it is the idea of it. And I'm not saying like you fall in love with the idea of the person, but you fall in love with the idea of what you and the other person could have been. And that's what's like really bothering me, because I'm a very hopeful person. I always see the good in people, and I always recognize that everybody, like even if it's difficult and what they're doing is not great, which there's really no instance of that within my past relationship, but I mean, obviously here and there, it's a fucking relationship. There's gonna be ups and downs, but you begin to like grieve the I don't know, that like idea, that idealized version of what you wanted. So when it's hard and it's constantly hard and you're constantly stressed and you're constantly this, you grieve the person that you wish you could have been in order to make things work. And that's what's been really hard, is it's like, and then you also grieve the idea of the person that you wish they could have been, that you could have combined with in order to do that. And it almost feels like no matter what happens, even if it gets terrible and all you feel is stress and it's misery, you still feel like you're giving up on the person. And that's what's really difficult. And it's like, it's hard to sort of accept that. Because it's not giving up on the person. It's recognizing when a situation becomes too much and you actually have to put yourself forward. And that's not doing that in a level of disrespect towards the other person. Honestly, it's actually the most respectful thing you can do, because you're doing what needs to be done in order for the better of both of you. And it's really hard to recognize that, especially when there's so much love between two people. But I was doing a ton of like Gemini research earlier today, and I started to learn about, I mean, obviously everyone knows about like the push-pull dynamic between like anxious avoidant and attachment styles and whatnot. But what I really thought was interesting was they described it as a dance. So just because it's always goes in two ways. So I could be doing the dance and I am completely secure, but that doesn't mean that the other person still doesn't act that way, and then vice versa. So this person can be extremely secure, but if I have my own problems, I can then bring that out of them. And if they have their own problems, they can bring that out of me. Or if somebody stays secure and then they're doing their own little dance, then it's very difficult. And no matter what happens, a relationship is two-sided because it is the dynamic that two people create with each other. That's why it's really interesting to see like somebody who could be considered such a horrible boyfriend, such a horrible girlfriend in one relationship, and then in the other they're like the greatest partner ever. It's just like the dynamic that people can bring out of people, and when people can bring out the worst in each other, which sucks, especially when it comes down to love. And it's hard to like recognize that love isn't always what keeps people together, and it is sometimes truthfully that dynamic. And whether or not it is easy, nothing's easy. That's the wrong way to put it. But it's not harmful. And when it's harmful, that's when it's bad. And it's painful to recognize that, because I'm still like, what's the word? I'm still grieving the idealized version of both myself and the partner that I was with. So I'm starting to like accept the actual reality of the situation, but actually learning to accept that like idealized what if version of what you wish would have been is, I feel like, the hardest part of grief, because that's when obviously like that's when the people are like, oh, I wish I would have said this, or I wish I would have done that, and then you kind of put yourself back in the situation, and it's nothing really would change because you haven't grown enough. And no one should ever go back to like an ex if you haven't grown enough or been able to like truthfully accept what led to that happening in the first place. And I don't think a short amount of time can really make that difference. And I think it is best to like truthfully move on, accept the situation, and not move on viewing a future or like a possible future with the other person, but genuinely moving on, and then with the idea that, yeah, you never are going to speak to them again. But that's a really hard reality to accept. So a lot of people try to convince themselves, it's like, oh, I want to move on for them to try and like lessen the blow. But, and that includes myself. So everyone wants to lessen the blow, but sometimes you just got to take shit straight to the face. And that's why it's so hard. But I think over time you start to become more like accepting and more willing to grow and willing to understand, especially at such a young age. And I don't want to say it's like a maturity level, but I think it is a maturity level when it comes to whether or not you want to stay within that like toxic sort of up and down phase compared to a slow and steady sort of love. Because I don't believe I've ever had that, truthfully. And honestly, I take responsibility for that, because I think I intentionally go for anxious attachment style people, because I have that like very deep fear of abandonment, as well as the fear of being replaced, and that runs really like deep through my core. And in my eyes, if you're with an anxious attachment style person, they're constantly on you, like on you and on you and on you and on you, to the point where it's like it feels almost hard for you to breathe because they're like so clingy to you. And I'm not describing anybody to a T, I'm just saying that that's sort of like the push-pull nature of the anxious avoidant dynamic. And I would never blame anybody for that. That's just like the nature of life, and that's the circle of life. But I think that within those circumstances, for me personally, because I'm an anxious avoidant, which is probably the worst attachment style, well, it is the worst attachment style that you could be in. Like, I recognize that if I am with an anxious person, it's great because I feel like that fear of abandonment or that fear of the unknown in my eyes gets diminished, but it really doesn't. What ends up happening is I then feel smothered. And because I feel smothered, I start to push away. And because I start to push away the anxious part in me, this is where the anxious avoidant comes in and not just the avoidant. So I start to push away, but then I'm like, actually don't go. So it's like, and then. So I think what I need to do properly is to actually find like a secure person, take it steady where it's not just like immediately like bombarded with so much emotion at the beginning of the relationship, which I would never blame anyone for. I mean, we're 22, we're young, we're dumb, we're stupid, we make dumb mistakes, and I'm guilty of that myself, and I've probably done that in every relationship that I've been in, so I would never blame anybody for that. But I think I need to actually take things slow and steady, because that way you build a proper stability, I guess the word would be, to grow and then kind of go from there. So I'm proud of myself and the, I guess, radical acceptance that I've started to like come to fruition with, but it still is obviously a battle, and every day you make the choice of whether or not to let it consume you or not. And some days it's hard to get out of bed, and then other days, you know, you just force yourself to do shit. So I'm proud of myself for doing this and talking about it, but I'm really excited to see the journey that I go on. And is it possible for me to get sucked back into that push-pull dynamic because it's high and low and it makes you feel something? Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say I'd be disappointed in myself. It's all I've ever known, so I wouldn't be surprised, but I would hope that I've recognized enough that my body gives me legitimate physical cues whenever I'm in that situation, and I think it's my nervous system telling me to evacuate. And I think I should probably listen to that more. Yeah. And then obviously, like, oh, it's weird too. So one thing that I've recognized was that within that, one of the things that helped really deeply, and apparently from a psychoanalytical or a psychotherapist sort of point of view, that I use caffeine or stimulants in order to push myself through that feeling. So the entire time I might be feeling extremely stressed, my nervous system might be going, "Rrr," but I then take caffeine because in my mind it speeds my brain up so fast that I can still live with that stress. Meanwhile, if it was just gone, it wouldn't be there in general. So I recognized that I did that, and I was like, holy shit, that's not cool. Well, I don't want to say like it is kind of cool, you know what I'm saying? So, but that's where I'm at, and I'm learning a lot about myself, and I'm excited to see what the future entails. I don't expect it to be perfect. I would never expect it to be perfect, but I hope to end the cycle. Am I going to? I hope so. But yeah, thank you guys. I love you, and have a good day.